Okay, everybody, thank you so much for waiting. We'll go ahead and we'll get started with today's presentation. We'll be talking about faster mobile sites. And so let's get cracking. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I will have everybody on the phone muted. And if you have any questions, please feel free to submit questions through the chat feature. At the end of the presentation, I will be providing a live presentation via email. I'll also be putting it into the Drive folder. If you have developers that want to take action on some of this, I will also be providing a copy of the original 77-page deck with all of the notes. This deck is down to about 32-ish slides, so it will be a little bit longer than our anticipated half hour. And then if you guys have any other team members who you want to have access to the deck and presentation after the this training, please let me know, and I will make sure to include them on the folders as well. All right, so I'm Angela. I am an agency development manager over here for Google, helping small to medium-sized agencies with client acquisitions. I do want to thank everyone for taking the time from your busy day to learn a little bit more about optimizing your clients' mobile websites, which in turn will inevitably make their AdWords campaigns and businesses more successful. Someone once said that if you want to be fast, you got to give up all of the things that are keeping you slow. Loading a web page is now more resource intensive than it's ever been before, and unless you've basically lived under a rock the last 5 to 8 years, you've all seen the massive shift to mobile. Roughly 34% of U.S. adults use a smartphone as their primary means of internet access. I mean, I do. I live with my phone. It's my alarm clock, so it's the first thing that I interact with in the morning. It's my primary means of communication, whether that's phone calls, texting, receiving more information through social media. It's where I shop for everything except for food, although I did just join a new food service. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. And it really is basically how I organize my entire life. So what this means for your client is that the first time a prospect interacts with their brand, it's mostly likely going to be happening on a mobile device. And as with everything, time is money. So I'm going to demonstrate the importance of mobile website page speed in relation to your client's business health. Mobile site speeds will be a major contributor to their success or failure. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to go over some performance constraints, what it matters, what the real performance model is, tools to evaluate, and key takeaways. I want to reiterate that this is a 10,000-foot view with regards to mobile site speeds. And again, there will be a presentation, a pitch deck available for the developers that gets into the nitty-gritty and has all of the cited sources. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about performance constraints. Laura Hogan, a performance expert, puts it very nicely that performance is the user experience and the performance is good design. You need to make performance part of everyone's workflow. Sometimes you're going to make choices in favor of performance. Other times you're going to make choices in favor of aesthetics. The key is that we're using all of the information available to you to make the right decision for you, your clients, and their site. Now, one caveat that we need to remember is that network connections vary considerably. And so obviously, the absolute performance is going to be dependent on the user's network. So we're going to be more focused on network-independent aspects of page performance, the server configuration, the HTML structure of the page, and its use of external resources such as images, JavaScript, and CSS. Now that's something that, of course, the developers will implement, but it's important that the salespeople understand these concepts as well, because these concepts are going to have to be a conversation piece when you are talking to your client so that they understand the importance of their mobile site and how it's going to be performing, because I see a lot of sites nowadays where it says mobile friendly and they get these 98 out of 100 scores, which is great. But then I also look at their mobile speeds and they're in the 60s or lower, which is even worse. So we want to be mobile friendly, but we want to be mobile speed friendly. And the reason, well, and actually there are lots of different reasons why mobile commerce remains an upper funnel affair. Get that out 10 times really fast. One of the biggest culprits is poor performance, and specifically load times. People have considerably higher expectations on mobile because we rely on touch. We feel latency very differently between our mobile phones and a mouse. According to the Mobile HTTP Archive, the average page served on mobile devices is more than 1 megabyte. Now we got to compare that to just a few years ago, where it was considerably lower at only 390 kilobytes in 2011. That means that our average page speed mobile has grown by over 200% since 2011. And when I talk about the 1 megabyte size for mobile, for desktop we actually typically see that for about 2 megabytes. In addition, it also contains an unprecedented number of resources such as images, scripts, other page components, and it's particularly bad when we have to resource them from other pages, which I'm going to talk about in more detail. It also contains an equally unprecedented number of redirects, which we need to ensure that are being avoided at all costs. So this, when we say redirects, I'm not saying calling information from other websites onto our website, but actually redirecting from page to page. And of course, we know with AdWords that we're not big, huge fans of that. Let's see. I can't think of anything else to mention on this slide. I'm pretty sure I covered it all there. So here, we actually did a recent Google poll of about 570 respondents. And about half of them, as you can see by that lovely green bar, said that their very top frustration was browsing mobile, was waiting for slow page loads. And I know for me, I get especially frustrated when I'm sitting there waiting for it, and it's gone on so long that I think any second my screen's going to time out. Then I'm going to have to put my password back in and all that. It's extremely frustrating. And so typically if I see a site that's like that, I'm just not going to go back. So we want to make sure that our clients are taking a look at their own behaviors. And when you're talking to them from a sales perspective, always say, think about your own behavior and how you interact when a page is taking far too long to load. We also have a Harris Interactive study from 2013, and from a firm called Jumio, I believe is how it's said. Basically, problems with online checkouts have also led to 56% of U.S. smartphone owners to actually give up on a mobile transaction. And I can tell you from my perspective, once again, I guess I'm not very patient. I, too, am one of those where I begin that, self-doubt. I'm already regretting the sale before it's even gone through because it's taking so long. So we want to ensure that we're doing a few different things because there were a few different documented factors that actually cause users to abandon a mobile purchase. And typically it's uncertainty over the purchase leads that actually leads to this 45% abandonment. Additional factors include the slow load times, 36%, difficulty navigating the app, which should never be a problem, but sometimes it's not very intuitive. That leads to about 31%. And hard time typing in, if you got fat fingers, your personal information on the small screens leads to about 28%. And finally, complicated payment processes. We want to avoid those at all costs. That's an additional 22%. So let's step back and just define performance and continue the conversation about why performance matters. One is we're all aware Google cares a lot about performance. It's how we rank our quality scores and where you're going to end up if you're doing AdWords, where you're going to end up on the page with regards to placement of your paid ads. So we want to make sure that we've got those really high quality websites, landing pages. And as we can see here, in less than a half a second, we can literally go through millions of pages with millions of results and do it all in less than a second. Our customer is our user, just as your clients are your customers, and the customer must have a good experience. We want to keep them using both of our products. We want to ensure that Google remains a verb and we are the best of the best. And so we become very, very user-centric, and users want fast, reliable load times. And that really is the bottom line. We've got to keep the user happy. As we all know, time is money, so page speed means money, plain and simple. The average impact of a 1-second delay means a 7% reduction in conversions. Now that's huge when you're talking about hundreds or even thousands of different interactions. For an e-commerce site that makes, let's say, $100,000 a day, a 1-second delay means $2.5 million in lost revenues per year. Also, we have a couple of studies, but one of them I found most interesting is when Facebook sped up its Android app for users. The reviews actually drastically improved. Eliminating those couple of extra seconds staring at the screen will actually get users to open up your app far more often. A 1-second page delay in load times typically means about 11% fewer page views, with a 16% decrease in customer satisfaction and a 7% overall loss in conversions, as we said before. All right, so this is quite interesting. Here is one of the case studies that we were talking about. As we can see in this graph, the longer the load times, the actual lower the conversion rates are. 2.4 seconds resulted in 1.9 conversion rate, where 3.3 seconds decreased by 0.4%. And that's huge when you're talking millions of dollars of sales. And I'm sure somebody's going to ask this, so let's just kind of target it right off the bat. Some of the pages actually were, the conversion rates were slower the faster they were. And while we're not 100% sure exactly why that was, the most common reason that we could come up with were page errors, 404 error pages, things like that. So that those first few bars are kind of an oddity, but once we see where we're having fewer of the error pages like we're seeing here, we're getting the higher conversions. And then as we increase in time, of course, the conversions decrease significantly. All right. On this one, let's talk about, we've had some research that's found conversions dramatically improved as the time decreases, and page speed in particular fills this void in enhancing marketability by improving the website user's experience to keep impatient online customers engaged and satisfied. So you're keeping me engaged and satisfied. I mean, if you think about when you go on to Amazon and what a really seamless transaction that is always, and even right down to giving you additional suggestions, so they're even cross-selling you. It's always a great transaction because it goes through, it's very simple, I've got my tracking information, and so I appreciate that. So a recent research report published by O'Reilly concludes that improvements in website end user experience by reducing these page load times will boost sales and conversion rates significantly. In the full presentation on the 77-page deck, there is a link to the Kingsta's Guide to Optimization that has some pretty stellar statistics you'll want to take a look at. There are a lot of great examples that I'll give a few of them a little bit later. Definitely are in that big, huge deck. So definitely stay awake through this next section for the couple that we've got here. All right, rail performance. This is a performance model that basically is an acronym, hence all caps there, where we're talking about response, animation, idle, and load times. At a very high and simple level, RAIL is a set of guidelines for fast-feeling UIs derived from studies on human perception, i.e. it's a user-centric performance model basically. Every web app has 3 or 4 distinct aspects to its life cycle, and performance fits very tightly into them, but in very different ways. Each of the criteria set is that a piece of code must meet in order to feel very snappy, so that it doesn't have a lot of jag to it. So for example, if a UI responds in less than 150 milliseconds to a click, the user does perceive this as an instant response. And so we want to have that as much as possible where possible. Now after the initial load, the website has to be optimized to handle these user interactions. So if a user taps on the Add to Cart button, the site needs to execute that action and load a new page. So we need to understand the full rendering performance over the life cycle of the site. Again, these are higher level concepts, but I just want to be sure that while we're talking to our clients about their websites, we're emphasizing different important model and performance issues that they should be addressing with their developers, if you're not their developer. So yeah, performance is the art of avoiding work and making any work you do as efficient as possible. Most companies design or redesign websites with the goal of increasing conversion rates, right? But the issue is many companies actually focus exclusively on the design, a look, a layout of the site. What we're trying to do is draw more attention to the role that the web performance plays in the conversion. And as I demonstrated in a few of the previous studies, a delay in load time will absolutely, positively, negatively affect conversions. All right. Okay, so by now everybody's sitting there going, okay, I hope that we're getting here somewhere and that the stuff, we got it, it's very important. So what the next question you're probably asking is, then what's a good load time? And the truth is, although Google recommends, sorry, I was going to say reminds, but that's not quite what I meant, as we recommend, a page need to load in less than a second. The answer is fairly subjective, obviously, depending on who you're talking to. But 5 seconds for a Target might not mean the same thing that it means to Walmart in terms of performance impact, but it does have an impact. Now, with that said, let's take a quick look at 3 iconic tech brands and how they perform. Now, this is an actual video that you will see in that full 7-page deck where it will go through each of these load times very specifically. And the one thing that you note when you're watching this video is that by the time the Microsoft Store finally loads, you're already looking on your phone to yourself starting to do some shopping with regards to an Apple Watch because you're already engaged there. And so what was most impressive is the fact that the Apple Store loaded obviously the most quickest as we can see here. And we found that 47% of consumers expect a page to load in 2 seconds or less. I described my experience earlier where I get very impatient, especially if I think my phone's going to time out and I'm going to have to put in my password all over again. So we want to keep in mind that at peak traffic times, more than 75% of online consumers left a site for their competitor's site rather than suffer these delays. So Jacob Nielsen says that people can handle up to a 10-second load time. I'm going to disagree with that. 8% of the people cited slow loading pages as a key reason for abandoning their purchase. 47% expected that a web page should load in 2 seconds or less. 57% will abandon a page if it takes more than 3 seconds. And a site that loads in 3 seconds experiences 22% fewer page views at a 50% higher bounce rate and a 22% less conversions than a site that does load in 1 second. Well, that site loads in 5 seconds experience will actually have 35% fewer page views, 105% higher bounce rate, and 38% fewer conversions. Again, when we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, this is millions upon millions of dollars every year. So here's kind of a generic one that I thought was a good fit. 1 to 2 seconds, you're doing great. 3 to 6 seconds, yeah, okay, you're average, but we should try a few things to improve it. uh, 7 to 10 seconds, we've really got to really start working on this. And over 10 seconds, we're just not keeping the attention of our users whatsoever. So we want to keep those in mind. One of the things that we can talk to our clients about is talk about the hows. We've discussed the what and whys, but now let's go in and start taking a look at when we do see them performing poorly, how are we going to help the client to make their website more efficient? There is actually a whole suite of factors that developers can control that will directly impact its performance. Now, here are a few of some of just the best practices. First and foremost, let's start limiting our impressions. Then let's proceed to limiting hits to the web server, so hits that are irrelevant. And finally, we want to optimize all of the data. And in short, what this makes sure is that we're going to be going with the flow. First impressions, limited server hits, optimized content. Critical rendering path. Optimizing the critical rendering path by prioritizing the display of the content that relates to the primary action that the user wants to take on that page is, again, a very, very important one. So if your action item, that should be one of the first things that renders so that they immediately see what your action is so that they know what the point of the page that they're about to view is. So if you want them to look at the page to call you to schedule or register for an online appointment or buy this particular item now, we want to make sure that the calls to actions are very clear and deliberate and first to load. We also want to optimize the content efficiency because the amount of data downloaded by each mobile site and app, the rendering performance, users will notice if sites and apps are just not running well, and they'll be less likely to go back or continue to use them. So we want to optimize rendering performance because it's crucial. If anybody out there knows someone or is someone who was all big on the Pokemon Go thing, everybody is well aware that when it was first released, they had so many hits that it was literally just shutting down their servers, and it took a couple of weeks to get the servers up to the performance level that it needed to be. And I recently heard somebody commenting that they're still getting locked out during high performance hours. So we want to ensure that we're avoiding these kind of pitfalls. And by delivering great performance, we need to optimize delivery, and we're talking about it by each and every byte. Byte deliveries should be our number one priority, and we have just a zillion different ways that we can monitor and optimize performance. Just like with your AdWords campaigns, websites should not be built and left alone, especially in today's mobile world. As each phone comes out, we've got new stuff coming out all the time. We want to ensure that they are fitting into the best performance within these new releases. Let's see. I'm not going to go into a whole lot with regards to these because this is more of a sales training. You'll have that full developer deck available for you. I was expecting some questions at this point, but I haven't seen anybody ping me just yet. So if you have any questions, please let me know. That's absolutely what this is for. All right. Yeah, look for this slide in the full deck because it has lots and lots of links, especially within the notes page. Now, this page, I'm obviously not going to read this whole entire thing. You can certainly come back when you have the full deck and take a look at this if I go through it a little bit too quickly. But a couple of points that I did want to make, that there are a few culprits. And when we're discussing design with your clients, we can actually help them to better understand what can help them to prevent from making more of these potential errors and drive more sales. Images in JavaScript are a website's absolute worst enemy. They are hugely reason why page speeds are very slow. So we want to make sure that we're not overtaxing or overwhelming our mobile sites. Custom fonts, they look great, but they also can be very taxing, especially if you're serving them on a third-party site. That can be hugely taxing. And I talked about it before, and I don't want to berate it, overkill it, and that is that redirects are page speed killers because it takes so long for the pages to defer through all of these different URLs. So we want to avoid that at all costs because first impressions absolutely 100% matter. So how do we win? Well, it all starts by nailing the best customer path for whatever it is that you want your customer to achieve on your site. In other words, you have to accommodate smartphone users, which means getting rid of friction. And how do we do that? We start by simplifying checkout forms, streamlining site design, optimizing performance. But none of this is worth much if the performance of the app absolutely sucks. So we want to make sure that it doesn't, that it's something that's useful, it's friendly, it's intuitive, and it's fast. The secret to successful web performance strategy is simple. Invest into monitoring measurement tools that will identify problems and regressions. Link business goals to performance metrics. So absolutely make sure that you're linking your analytics to your AdWords so that we can pull all of that additional data. And then optimize from there. And we want to treat performance as an absolute feature because it really is. Teams that succeed in building the tools and infrastructure to measure link performance to the bottom line, we will get better conversions, and that really is our goal. So we want to make sure that we're establishing everything and putting in place all of these tools to monitor, send alerts out, send them out to your mobile phone so that if something happens that we know that it's happening immediately and we can go in and do optimizations accordingly. I mentioned Amazon earlier. I'm a huge Amazon shopper. I rarely ever go to into stores if I don't have to. I even bought my bed online because I'm not a fan of busy consumer areas. So Google Shopping and Amazon are my absolute best friends around the holidays. Amazon has actually successfully bridged the gap between mobile commerce and online e-commerce by establishing trust with the consumers. They're doing really well because they're optimizing for the primary action, and they avoid all of the slowing that stops the consumer from getting to that ultimate action. Think about yourself if you were in the physical world and you got done shopping and you had a few items you wanted to get through at the line and there were 20 people in front of you. You probably just put them down and go to a different store. And it's the same when we're talking especially about e-commerce. People will bounce out of your site and go somewhere else if it's taking too long or they're just not having a good experience. And that's why Amazon put page load as part of a major portion. But it's not the whole story. Amazon customers have full access to their existing cart, their wish list, their Prime memberships, their shipping options, their order history. They can one-click it. They can look at some of the suggestions to see if they're getting better deals if they bundle package things. And once the customer's made the decision, they want to go from what I want in my cart to what I bought. And they want to do it in less than 30 seconds. So Amazon found that revenue increased by 1% for every 100 milliseconds. Get that. 1% revenue increase for 100 milliseconds that it shaved off from its download times. Now, milliseconds sound ridiculous, but when you can say 100 milliseconds is 1% revenue and you got millions and millions of dollars going through your website a year, that suddenly becomes something that is absolutely phenomenal. And as we can see from their stock market behavior, they're doing something very, very right. All right, another one of my favorites, Netflix. They have actually made performance their top tier priority. I still sometimes feel while waiting for Netflix to load their main screen and choose all of the options that they've chosen for me. It still takes a little bit of time, but hey, they're getting better. The focus of their redesign was actually to get their interactive content in front of the users as quickly as possible. And this is definitely the right goal. They found that faster startup times led to more satisfying usage. The impact of their efforts netted a 70% reduction in startup time and was focused in three key areas: server and client rendering, universal JavaScript, and JavaScript payload reductions. So again, JavaScript is a major, major contributor when we're talking about mobile load time. So we want to make sure that we are addressing that. All right, so some of our key takeaways. We'll talk a little bit about this, but it really boils down to performance is more than just the page load. And we want to have a variety of different tools at our disposal. So it's all about tools, not necessarily living 100% by rules, because depending on different configurations, it's going to change. We want to profile then optimize, and we want to prioritize the user needs using the Rail performance model that we talked about. So if there is anything to remember from all of this, remember the following. 2 performance levers to focus on: page load and runtime. While page load is a key factor, it doesn't help if something is terrible to use, which is the reason we need to ensure that runtime performance is also good. So animation scrolling, all that kind of good stuff. Non-minimized, minified, I always say this wrong, minified, thank you, resources waste data and increase our overall load time. And unoptimized images, first of all, it's unexcusable, but they're an absolute data waste and increase to the load time. 63% of bytes on the average web page were due to images. We want to make sure that we have images, but we want that they are minified and that they are 100% optimized. And we want to increase load time for every single request and every opportunity that we have. There are a couple of more examples in the full 77-page deck. Of course, I'm trying to keep this down to 30 minutes or less, so I'm already in near breaching that. So we'll jump to the next slide here. All right, so this brings us back to the beginning. And what is the happy minimum? Well, let's follow Rail. Developers need to think about their users and the tasks and how it impacts performance. Designers should learn about the technical constraints and design for task completion. Most importantly, Rail, response, animation, idle, and load, allows us to frame the performance conversion around some guiding principles that specifically focus on the user. So always remember, with Google, the user is our customer, and everything we do is to make a better user experience. For example, if our goal is to deliver a first load within 1,000 milliseconds, what can we do, or do we need to do on the network side to make this possible? So we really want to think about the back end. If we need to optimize for responsiveness, how do we do this? And prioritizing process of the user input, and think about the background of other work, because faster sites lead to better user engagement. Faster sites lead to better user retention, and faster sites inevitably lead to higher conversions. Simply put, speed is a feature. Performance is a feature. Deliver your content to your users as quickly as possible. Once they're on your site, you got to make sure that those page interactions are rendering as smoothly as possible. And there is no silver bullet for performance. Build the site, run your tools, optimize, optimize, optimize. Last parting thought here. I recently was taking a look at a major mobile phone company, and I thought it was particularly funny that as far as mobile speed was concerned, as mobile friendliness was concerned, they were 100 out of 100, but their mobile speed was 63 out of 100. And that really says a lot because it was a little bit janky getting the major image to load onto that page on my mobile phone. And I kind of giggled because I just thought they're selling a mobile phone, and yet the mobile friendliness seems to be kind of soft. So just kind of an interesting last thought there. I want to thank everybody for their time. I still haven't seen any questions pop up, so if anything does arise after the presentation, don't hesitate to give me a quick email. There's my email for you. And I hope everyone enjoyed this, and if you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. Thanks again. Have a great night.